It's very nice to see all of you. And it's a little bit heartwarming to know that you are interested in retrospectives and creating happy, engaged, and productive teams. Now, today I'm going to be splitting this lecture up in 3 parts. I am going to be inviting you to a journey of a team and how their retrospectives affected their work and how that journey changed for them and how the retrospective changed. And I'm going to be sharing a little nuggets and stuff that they did that hopefully you can take some part of and use in your retrospectives. I will also be talking about what makes great retrospectives in the end. But to begin with, I want to talk a little bit about retrospective to make it sure that we're all speaking the same language so you know what I'm saying and get my lingo. So, just getting a little bit acquainted where I am. Okay. So, I come from software development, and so I will be basing this talk a lot of Scrum retrospectives. And Scrum retrospectives are also called sprint retrospectives, and I'm going to head into a little explanation to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I'm going to call this, Scrum 101. This is kind of a diagram that I'm going to draw up for you, just so that you get a little image in your head that we can all relate to. Basically, in Scrum, we start with a product owner, and he has an idea of what he wants to build. This is the basic. I am saying this is the basic of Scrum. I know it's not part of Scrum itself. It's kind of left out there. But let's have in mind that this is the basic where we start with developing software. And what then happens is that the Scrum Master goes off and meets the team, and they set down a plan together, a plan on how they're going to execute some part of that vision that he has. And the next thing that happens in Scrum is that here all the actual work happens. This is the so-called sprint, where all the work happens. So even if I'm drawing up a circle here, this is where most of the work happens. And for those of you who know Scrum or want to know, you can find details on that. I'm not going into that. But what happens afterwards is that at the end of the sprint, the team delivers something. They made a plan, and they have a delivery at the end. They represent something, part of the idea that they deliver. And the last phase that we enter is a review of what they did previous to the delivery. So at the end of the sprint, they have a retrospective, you can also call it review, where they look into what, from the start, from the idea, through the plan, through all the delivery, through the sprint itself, what did we do? What could we do better? What could we improve? What do we want to change? What do we want to try out? And then we feed that back into the loop, and it's a continuous circle where we're always trying to improve and try out new stuff. So the focus today will be here on the bottom, the review part. And this image, I'm calling it Scrum 101. This could be applied to anything called Agile. This could be applied to anything software development. You always start off with an idea, you put down a plan, you deliver something, and then you review it. So, I'm going to call this sprint retrospectives, and you might want to look at it as agile retrospectives. So if you're interested in knowing more about retrospectives, I suggest you Google agile retrospectives because you will find a lot of content under that. And here's a quote from the Agile Manifesto. One of the last principle actually talks about this. If you're doing Agile, you should at some point look back and say, how are we doing? What can we do to improve or adjust our behavior? So, to get into this talk, I'm going to tell you that my personal feeling is that the retrospectives are the heartbeat of a team. They're the heartbeat of the software development team, where they say we're going to work in an iteration, call it a sprint or whatever, for an X amount of time. And at the end, we're going to take a look back and say, what can we do to improve or make some changes? And to me, you could have a new team, and I would say, you know, fail everything. It's okay to fail in the sprint itself, fail on the demo, don't fail on the retrospective meeting. Because if you skip that one, you're not going to change anything, you're not going to improve, so you're going to miss out and just doing the same thing all over again. And I'm going to put down a little hypothesis that retrospectives make teams. So if the retrospectives makes team, because I said these are the heartbeat, this is the time for the teams to meet up, unwind, figure out what they want to do better. And I'm also saying that great retrospectives make great teams. So what is then a happy, engaged, and a productive team? Where you get everybody happy, meaning that they enjoy themselves. They feel that they belong, they like being there. Productive means that they're delivering, that they're getting results out. And engaged means that they're taking part in the team's effort. To me, that's a great team. Hence, great retrospectives make great teams. So, that's part one. Hopefully we're all on the same page for the things to come here. So I want to introduce you to the Honey Badgers. This is a single moment in time of the Honey Badger's life. It was a particularly good day where we had actually created t-shirts for everybody on the team. And Simi here, the third one from the left, he had actually created these South Park characters for all of us that we printed on t-shirts. And this was the day that we got them. And since I have myself there up on the wall, I want to tell you a little bit about myself, even though I should have started with it. I'm an Agile coach, a Scrum Master, and I've worked for various companies in various teams throughout the last years. That's been my choice to move a lot around because I'm really curious about what happens in teams. And I've been really lucky with working with a lot of great people and learning a lot of great things in many teams. And in this particular team, I was the Scrum Master. I was part of 3 who joined at a merger of 2 teams into the Honey Badgers team. And during my time there, I always had another team or other teams or other project I managed to. So even if I was the team Scrum Master, I was not a 100% Scrum Master in this team. I had other duties as well. If you want to know more about me, you can find me on logihelgu.com. For those of you who only speak English, that's logihelgu.com. So, I want to take you on a road trip. This is about roughly a year's worth of retrospectives for the Honey Badgers team. And I want to invite you all to get a retro ticket to get a little insight into how the team did the retrospectives. We actually had a competition once, the Honey Badgers, and the prize that we had was a retro ticket. One could win a prize and get to go on a retro with us. We were so full of it, how great we thought the retro was, that we thought it was a great prize. And we did get one guy. He won and he took part. So, first of all, I want to talk about 3 things, the 3 basic elements of a Honey Badger retrospective. And this is kind of the beginning of this talk. This is how it was in the start. These are the elements that work, the basic elements that we need to have in all retrospectives. So 1, retro photo. I would take a photo of all retros. That's me. For those of you who work with me, that's me, sorry. I take photos. Mostly because I want to remember things and I want to have some evidence, we were there, we did this. And here's a typical one at the beginning of this era that we're looking into. And as you can see, Yeah. Well, I can see there's some plan of what we're doing, some confidence of something. I can't remember this particular retro. But this is just a panorama photo shot, so we have some evidence of who was there at that time. So the second thing that we had on the retrospectives was beer. And I mean, it's always good to have food or beverages on a meeting. And in our case, at that time, the names of the sprints were named after beers. So, it kind of made a match that let's have the beers too in the retro and just say, we'll just taste them. And typically we would have, here you can see 4 beers on the table. So it was not like we were drinking a lot of them, but we might be, here you can see we were probably 9 on this retro. And sometimes we didn't even open up all the bottles, but this was for tasting. And what we also did during the retro, that we gave them some grades, You got to taste the beer and you also got to give it a grade, star grade from 1 to 5 stars, and then we could discuss that too. A little bit of fun thrown into there, just to say, if you miss out on the retro, you're going to miss out on tasting the beer and that discussion. So, and the third part was the retro page. So after we had done a retro, I would, as the facilitator, go into Confluence, whatever tool you have, and write up the meeting notes and whatever was decided on that meeting. Which is a really good point. You should always have meeting notes. A meeting without meeting notes didn't happen. Sorry. So I'm going to give you a little example of how we wrote down the meeting notes. Honey Badger's retro page example. So this is just a mock-up of how we did it because I don't have access to these pages anymore. To begin with, we had the sprint name, the date, the retrospective, just to say that this was a retrospective, and then the team. And then it would probably say meeting notes. This was just the title. And here's a small nugget or a small tip if you're using Confluence. It's really important to have a lot of description in your title, because you're going to be linking to them from other pages. You're going to be linking from them from Jira tickets, and you're going to be using the search to find them again. So if your pages do not have a descriptive name and detailed information, you're going to be in a lot of trouble finding it again. So then we would have the retro photo. We would always put that in there just for fun. We saw who was there. Dates doesn't really matter because we have it at the top. We would have the participants, so they would all be tagged. I would tag them along the same heads as they were on the photo. And then I would tag the ones that were missing. So if you missed out on a retrospective, you would get tagged and you would get an email or notification, this meeting happened, you missed out on it. Link to the sprint page that we were working on, and then the meeting notes at the bottom. And in the beginning, we used to put some voting for the beers, so you would actually have some reason to go into the meeting notes afterwards. Just read over them and say, okay, I'm going to vote this for the beers afterwards. Okay, so I am going to share with you my favorite retrospective, because this photo here, I'm going to look at the photo a little later, because here on the left side you can actually see some setup of post-its. This is what we did in the beginning of this era. We used to have post-its. I love post-its. I love trying on new things, and usually about half the time I would do the learning matrix. So if you want to find out more, I'm going to explain it a little bit, but learning matrix if you want to Google more. And here you see the basic results of it. And so what happens in a learning matrix is you would just write up 4 quadrants, and you would say, we got the good stuff, we got something bad, we got ideas, and we got compliments or beers or flowers or kudos, however you want to put it. And write down silently, each and every one in the team would just sit down, write silently, maybe we would put on music for 2 tunes. And then one by one we would stand up and describe our tickets. So for example, I'm just going to take an example. I might be retroing my work in doing these slides. And I really like looking back at all the pictures and stuff we did. Green ticket. Bad thing, this is probably going to be my last talk about the honey badgers. It's kind of the third one and the last one. I'm a little bit sad about that. An idea, I should actually hold the retrospective meeting today with the team. That would be really fun. And compliments, I'm going to give a compliment, a special shout out, a kudos to Kiele in the team, because he actually put in a note there and a quote that I'm going to come to later that opened my eyes to something that I hadn't seen before. So I might stand up, say all these things, and I get someone else to stand up, and we'd start compiling some image of the sprint that we were doing. And you get a lot of input from everybody. And the basic thing you can actually see, when you look at this, after everybody has said their stuff, are there more green tickets than red? That tells you a lot. But I mean, if you were there, you have a lot of information from everybody that you can work with. And in the learning matrix, the next step you want to do is break down the lines and start categorizing into whatever categories you want to put, and then figuring out action items. And the yellow ones usually being the quickest one to find out. I don't like dot voting, but do whatever you want. I like to kind of keep it a flow, and if I'm in the discussion, I can just lead the following steps. But again, that's for you to figure out when you do your retrospectives. So if you take a look back at the Honey Badger's retro page, what we ended up doing is that we added these things into the Confluence page. And we actually created a template for this. And well, there was one wild category, because sometimes we didn't figure out what it should be, so we added this one just to help us out. But what we actually did is that we started writing the notes on the go. And I'm especially going to say that this is a pro tip, because what it did, it actually gave everybody the direct feedback on the screen what the notes were, so they could change them or say something if something wasn't right. And I didn't have to spend time afterwards putting the notes in. So what happened in late time of the area, the first thing we would start would take the photo, the retro photo, and then we would directly upload that into the Confluence page. So we would be creating the meeting notes, the Confluence, the sprint page, retrospective page, directly at the meeting. It saved a lot of time. And as I said, this used to be every other retro, but then towards the end and very closely after we began doing this became the only way we did the retro. So constant, always doing the learning matrix inside a Confluence page. Okay, so back to this photo. We're going to look at this part of the photo. So, around the time that this was, the guys they were getting used to me taking photos of them all the time. So they started doing this. And I started throwing this around in our internal chat, just, hey, look at this guy, zooming in on him and sending just small pictures of stuff that we did. And I want to zoom in a little bit here, because we saw this photo earlier. This was one of the first photos we did. I think we probably shamed Gunni for being on the phone. So naturally, that's what he did on the next photo that we took of him. And here you can see we're looking at the retro page from the last meeting, figuring out, did we do everything we said we were going to do? And while we were taking a retro photo, he had to pretend to be on the phone, just to shame us back. And if I remember correctly, this picture of JB was probably the one that started the faces. Because I specifically remember cutting this photo out and sending it to everybody. And it kind of started everybody into the setup of doing something fun for the photo. And so I'm just going to add a few photos here. You can see all the things I talked about. I mean, we have the beers, we're doing the meeting notes on the go, and everybody's starting posing. Here we have no beer because this was obviously taken in the morning, since some guys are eating their breakfast or putting it on their head. And I'm not showing you the bloopers. I mean, some of these photos failed miserably. They failed so badly that they were not in there. Sometimes we had to do a retake. And this actually became kind of a process, you know. What are we going to do in this photo? You know, let's put our feet up or cover our eyes, no, our faces. You know, finding stuff that's lying around. You know, this was supposed to be some markers on the doors. Let's put them on our faces. I can't even remember what was going on there. Probably something fun. So, what happened at one time, and I'm going to change this photo a bit, is that we ended up with kind of having themes for our photos. And if I remember correctly, it was Simi here who wanted to be pointing to himself. And for some reason, we were talking about wizards and stuff. I can't remember why. So everybody wanted to be in some wizardry pose, and it ended up with everybody being edited as wizards. And again, this is just how it evolved. You know, the team was just taking part, and we were just doing it. And this is a particularly fun one that I really like. Imagine being in a meeting with your team and asking everybody in the team, guys, can you all stand in a corner and look scared? I mean, I could not do that in any team. You have to have a certain amount of trust between everybody. But I mean, they were willing to do it. And I will just added the photo because we were probably talking about Stranger Things at that moment. And you might miss out on a meeting that would end up with you being edited into a lot of places on the photo. This is a particularly an image that I like this image the most, so I'm going to take a bigger look at it. So, and what was really fun is that this is just taken on a smartphone. And usually I'm the one taking the photo. Sometimes I'm in it. It depended. So imagine you're there. You're taking a photo of everybody. And as soon as I had, you know, I told the guy on the left, Scabby there, you know, Scabby, I've already taken your photo. You can start moving. He didn't. Nobody moved during the whole time. Because nobody wanted, A, they didn't want to mess up their pose, and B, they didn't want to mess up anybody else's pose. So, you know, it was only a couple of seconds, but everybody was silent, dead silent, and nobody moved a muscle until I took the phone down. It was, I really always liked that moment. And again, you know, guys, you know, put your heads to the tables, let's do something and edit it. You might deserve something to be put on everybody's face. This was actually, sadly, this guy he was the winner of the retro ticket, but his face didn't show up there because the image was edited with another guy's face. So, I want to show you a picture that's a little bit earlier than in the end. This is of a remote meeting. I, as the facilitator, might not be present for some reason. I might be remote. Currently, you can see me there. I'm at home, probably with a sick kid or something. But we still had the meeting. And I want to show this because this was the retro photo from that meeting. And to me, this just represents fun. You know, we're saying, you know, guys, we're going to do the photo. I'm remote. We're not going to do the panorama on. Just do something fun for a moment. I'll edit it. We'll add some stuff. And then we get on to the serious business. And another good question is, you know, what happens if there's no facilitator? I'm not there. I'm not remotely. Maybe the PO is not there. So here we have a meeting, image from a meeting where probably me and the PO and somebody else was traveling. And I was really, I'm just going to say proud when I saw this photo. Because, you know, they did the meeting. They did the same setup. They took the photo, and they had fun. They had the beers, and they just goofed around. They didn't do it because I told them to do it every time. They just did it on their own. That's how we want the things to happen. So, I'm really pleased to say that the culture remained. It didn't remain because the team is no more, but it did remain after I left the team. They sent me these 3 pictures also, so I could actually show, because they wanted to show me, Logi, we're still doing this, even though you're not here. And to me, it's just heartwarming, knowing that the culture remained within their team, our team. So they're still editing stuff, they're still having fun, and this is the last photo I got. I have no idea what's happening, but I'm guessing they drew their own faces, or some face. And so, with this kind of ends the photo display from the team, from the retrospectives. But I did ask the guys last year, at the end of last year, when I knew I was doing this lecture, guys, I need some input from you, because I'm going to be talking from my point of view on this lecture. And I really liked our retro, so I need your input, guys. So I asked them to tell me what they felt. I sent them a questionnaire. It was just online. We did not have a meeting. And I asked them, how good was the retrospective on a scale of 1 to 10? They said 9. Of course, bear in mind, this is a team that did those meetings. It should be a high grade. Still, just a 9. And I asked, and there was a comment there. This is the comment that I mentioned before from Kelly. To me, I just did the structure of the retro and the template to simplify my life. Because I like changing it around. I like doing a different retro. I like trying out new things. Because some things work for one team, it doesn't work for another. I love doing this mix-up of things. But this comment actually told me, okay, they really liked that they had a narrowed structure that was actually put down and they knew what was happening. And to me, this was kind of a revelation that, okay, it really helped them knowing the structure of the retro, because it can be hard for some people to go into a meeting and you don't know what's going to happen. So, Kelly, again, thank you for this comment. Then I asked the team, how fun was the retro? And we can see, to me, quite a difference. Almost everybody at the top. And another comment, and this one is to stress out that it's maybe not always important to try and figure out how to improve, but just to unwind with your team. I also asked them what was the best thing about our retrospectives. The team bonding, taking silly pictures, typing, trying new beers, and just talking. Because imagine you're working for a period of time, it might be 2 weeks, 1 week, 3 weeks, and then just sitting down and just talking, just listening to each other. We don't have to focus all the time on how to improve or do new stuff or what worked well. Just talk to each other. That's why I highlighted this one. An opportunity to have fun and allowed for some needed team bonding. The team bonding was something else that I'm not talking about here, but we did a lot of. A small game. I also asked them what was the worst, to kind of figure out, was there anything that was bad? And, forgetting beers maybe. I mean, that happens. Sometimes we forgot the beers. So if that was the worst thing that happened in our retro, then I think they went really well. And the final thing that I'm going to share is that I asked them how important the retros were. And they unanimously agreed that the team would not have been the same without them. Which I totally agree with too. So, we're at the end of the second part of this lecture. We're gonna say goodbye to the honey badgers, but don't be scared or feel bad for them. We still meet up. This is just a couple of weeks ago where the team met up. So there's still a bond between us that will hopefully always be there. I love those guys. So, I'm going to move on to part 3, great retros. So what are the 3 basic elements of a great retro. This is based on what I've learned with this teams and other teams and what I've, all the knowledge that I have. And I'm kind of running out of time, so I'm going to try and keep this brief. So if you want to remember something, remember these 3 things: participation and trust. You have to get everyone involved, and this is something you'll learn when doing retrospective and going on through how to do them. It has to be a safe place. You have to be ready to say, you don't have to say, but you have to know that you can trust the guys not to judge you and you will not judge them. It's a safe place. Number 2, it has to be positive and fun. You want to have it positive and not focus on the negative. You're going to have to talk about a lot of hard stuff, but it has to be on a positive note. And why do I put an asterisk there on the fun? Because if you ask me what's the best motivator that you can find for a team, then that's fun. We were just having fun on the meetings, but we discussed a whole lot of stuff that we could not have done without having fun. And number 3, probably the most important one and the most hardest one for teams to get is actions into daily work and follow up on your retrospective. So if you remember the Scrum 101 circle that I made, the work that you do on your retrospective and you decide the action items that you're going to have, they have to be part of the daily work that you do. And the best teams, they know this. They know that, whatever we do and we're going to improve or try out or do differently next time, that might be more important than the product that we're working on because we have to improve. So, these are the 3 things that hopefully you can learn something from. In the end, I want to tell you, retro anything. Do this whenever you feel like you should know something. If I'm teaching an Agile course, I will do this in the end. If I'm doing a Scrum band at home, I will do this with the kids at home. And if I'm working in a software team, I will do a retro and figure out what we can improve or just what we want to change. Thank you.